What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Backup Fantasy Sports. It is Friday, July 22nd. My name is Ewan Leith, and today we are talking F1 Fantasy with a French Grand Prix preview. This weekend is going back to normal for F1 after a sprint weekend in Austria. So 2 practices today, a practice tomorrow morning or afternoon, qualifying on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. So this weekend, we will be racing at the Circuit Paul Ricard, which had its first Grand Prix in 1971. It'll be 73 laps, 15 corners, 2 DRS zones, and hopefully a bunch of championship chaos. Today, I will be talking about what we can look out for this weekend, and then going through the game with some drivers on streaks, looking at points per million, the values in the game, who's been good all year long, who's been in the top 5. And then I will also be taking a look at DraftKings DFS lineups and just sneaking a peek at what their pricing is going into the weekend. So, what is there to watch this weekend in terms of if you are an F1 fan? I mean, can Ferrari continue to chase down Red Bull? I was watching the weekend warm-up on the F1 YouTube channel this weekend, and Red Bull said that the sprint weekend did affect their data gathering when it comes to tire degradation, because for a sprint weekend, you only have one practice on Friday morning, then you qualify, another practice Saturday, and then you have the sprint. So they never really got in their full race pace kind of practice that they wanted to see how the tires would fare. It's going to be piping hot in France this weekend. It's a massive heat wave. It's all over the world, but especially in Europe right now with temperatures at 38, 39 degrees Celsius, touching 100 degrees Fahrenheit there. In the UK this week, it was over 40 degrees Celsius, record temperatures in London. So the continent is literally in some places on fire, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the teams deal with their 4 tires melting in the ground over Sunday afternoon. But back to Ferrari. Can they continue their current form? I mean, Carlos Sainz nabbed his first win at Silverstone, and then Charles Leclerc won for the first time since Australia last race in Red Bull's backyard. So they are chipping away, but I mean, with every time we think Red Bull is struggling, like at the start of the year when Max had those 2 DNFs, and then right now when they didn't get their full data gathering in Austria, and then Max had a issue with the car, I believe it was a power unit, I believe, in Silverstone. It's just, these are just random occurrences. And I think everyone is, after last year in 2021 with Hamilton versus Verstappen, I think everyone wants another epic title fight. But Red Bull have kind of dominated this year. They've dominated the middle part of the year. They weren't great at the beginning. They haven't been good towards the back end of the first half of the season. We've got 2 races until the summer break. We've got France and then we've got Hungary. And I think everyone just wants to create a title fight. But I mean, Ferrari have been so unreliable as well. Like Red Bull have been more consistent than Ferrari. This weekend will be very interesting to see if Ferrari have actually made a step in the right direction to get closer to Red Bull, or if Red Bull have just had a couple of strange races and they are going back to domination. One thing that could mix up the title race outside of Ferrari and Red Bull is Mercedes. They have looked much better the last month. Lewis Hamilton with back-to-back-to-back podiums. George Russell has been strong outside of a first corner crash at Silverstone, and the car is looking a lot better and a lot smoother around these traditional Grand Prix tracks. They struggled the middle part of the season there with Monaco and Azerbaijan just not going well with the street circuits. The car is much more suited to a Silverstone track, which kind of resembles the Paul Ricard circuit this weekend. I was on the F1 2022 game this morning, just trying to remind myself what that track looks like. It has some of the sweeping corners like Silverstone. It's not as good, in my opinion, as the Silverstone track, obviously. But it has its moments. It's a fun racetrack to zoom around. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes did claim the win there. I won't tell you what difficulty I had the computer on. Regardless, so Mercedes are here. They seem to be picking up momentum. They seem to be making strides to get back towards the top step of that podium. No massive upgrades, I think. They have something different with the nose that they were kind of speculating, or they were teasing us on Twitter about with some screenshots there. Fun fact I did hear on the weekend warm-up, though, was it is Lewis Hamilton's 300th Grand Prix this weekend. So congrats to him on that. Not so congrats to him on the fact that no driver has ever won a race after their 300th Grand Prix. So if there's going to be someone that does it, it's going to be the GOAT, Lewis Hamilton, who breaks that streak. It would be surprising if it happens this weekend, but I mean, if he's ever going to get that 8th championship, he's probably going to have to set a new record for that little stat right there. Outside of the three main guys, I mean, Alpine is in front of their home crowd. Pierre Gasly has got his home race. So there's definitely some French representation for the Grand Prix this weekend. Alpine are bringing some upgrades, I believe, and they've been racing really well. Fernando Alonso has been lights out this year. He's had some terrible bad luck. I mean, he's looked so fast. He's been driving great, and Esteban Ocon has just probably been the most underrated driver of the season. Right now, he's 7th in points per $1 million on the F1 fantasy game with 1.29 points per million. And then finally, Haas building momentum back-to-back double points finishes for the American team. Mick Schumacher seems to be coming into his own a tiny bit. It is only 2 races. I don't think we should be putting him in the 2024 Ferrari just yet. They were talking on the weekend warm-up. I mean, it was quite a gossipy episode there with silly season right around the corner, with Daniel Ricciardo kind of seeming to be the biggest domino to ready to fall amongst the whole schedule, because if Ricciardo leaves, like, there's rumors that Vettel might go to McLaren, which would open up a seat at Aston Martin for some young drivers or for anyone to kind of switch teams. And there's definitely some young talent knocking on the door. So that's kind of like a bird's eye what to watch just as an F1 fan this weekend. Drivers and constructors on streaks for the actual game, F1 fantasy, not a lot going on. Just a qualifying streak for Ferrari. Everyone else has been through their streaks, or they've DNF'd, or they've reset, that kind of thing. Using the Mega Driver chip in Austria would have been ideal because it was a sprint weekend. And just as a note, there's this weekend, and then it's Hungary, where you have to play your Mega Driver and your wild card for the first half of the season. So right now it's Friday. Maybe you're listening to this on Saturday. Maybe you're listening to this after the race has happened, and it's all irrelevant. So you need to activate that wild card once the race ends in France on Sunday afternoon. That way you have a full week or two, no, just a week to get the wild card in before the first half of the season ends, even though we are actually halfway right now after 11 races. Yeah, how did I do in Austria? Let's go check it out real quick. I believe I scored 280 points, which is pretty good. Felt felt strong about that. I think the last time I even had a F1 fantasy podcast was before Miami. It's been a quick minute for that. My team looks totally different. I decided to jump on the Haas bandwagon before Austria. So I have Magnussen and Mick Schumacher in there. So that went swimmingly. And I have Leclerc, Bottas, and Verstappen with Red Bull as my constructor. So if you've played fantasy football in America for the NFL, very stars and scrubs like lineup here. I've got the top two in the driver's standings with the constructor standing leader, and then Valtteri Bottas with Magnussen and Schumacher. My team value is at 105 million right now. So, and I have 1.2 in my budget. I can't imagine making any moves right now, but it will be just because it was going to take a wild card for me to get out of how I have constructed my team at this moment. If Mercedes look really good, I can try to, maybe get Verstappen down, but Red Bull's too strong. It's kind of like cheering for the evil empire or the New York Yankees or something, but it just feels like everyone wants there to be more of a title fight, but I do think Red Bull are going to continue their march towards the double titles here in 2022. So I can't see myself making a ton of changes. Maybe Bottas, I don't know, with 1.2 million in the bank and him at 9.7 million, I can't really go anywhere all that lineup changing. He's at 9.7, so where could I get? Yeah, not going a lot of places there. I can go down to Lance Stroll. Don't want to do that at all. I can go down to Yuki Tsunoda, which could be interesting because AlphaTauri have said that they are bringing upgrades for the first time since Imola this weekend. So Pierre Gasly getting a nice little homecoming present for the French Grand Prix from his team there. We'll see how he does. And as far as points per million, so we'll start to look at the values of the F1 fantasy game now that we're 11 races into the season. So let me go to this little table here. I'm going to sort by points per million. Alrighty, so no surprise here with Charles Leclerc leading the way at 1.72 points per million with his price started. I mean, can't blame the makers of the game. Maybe the pricing needs to be more dynamic, but he started at 18.5, 18 maybe, and he's just obliterated that this season. So he leads the charge with the most value despite being second in the driver's standings. Then it's Valtteri Bottas, then Sergio Perez, Kevin Magnussen, just because he came in so dirt cheap at 6 million. And then Carlos Sainz rounds out the top 5. But those are season long. Those are kind of like, like teams have had strong, like Charles Leclerc, super strong start. But he kind of faltered. So let's check out what I did was I went to the last 5 races, a little bit of a smaller sample size. And actually, for overall points in the F1 fantasy game, Max Verstappen leads, no surprise there. He's been pretty dominant outside the last 2 races, but he did pick up qualifying win and the sprint race win in Austria and still finished second in the Red Bull ring. But Lewis Hamilton comes in at second, so he is not going down without a fight, but he's just too expensive to really be worth it. Like, just go with Max. He's in a better car. The team is just running like a far superior strategy for 2022. And I was thinking about this morning. A lot of these teams are like, it's halfway point. It's time to start making that decision. Are we continuing to fight for 3rd, 4th, 5th place in the constructors standings, or is it time to look ahead to 2023? I believe Fernando Alonso is saying like Alpine is having a great year. They're battling for 4th with McLaren. That's really good for them, but they also don't want to get caught with their pants down for 2023 and only focus on this season. And that was making me wonder about Mercedes. They haven't been in this position before where it's like they're out of it. Like a lot of people, I won't say we all, but a lot of people want Mercedes to get back to the top step of the podium, show some progress, just make it so that we're not all like just so sad. Like Lewis Hamilton is experiencing a Super Bowl hangover like none other. Just happens in the NFL all the time. It's a very easy comparison, probably a lazy one. But how do they cope with knowing that they're not going to win the drivers or the constructors championship this year? Are they built to throw the 2022 season in the tank in August and just focus on 2023? That's going to be interesting to see as the season plays out in the second half of the year. Likewise, Red Bull, Ferrari, they've had their down years, or like Lewis Hamilton was locking up the championship so early some years that they've had time to look ahead, so they know what it's like to race for second and third in the championships and still like how to build a car. It's just a thought I wanted to throw out there, and just wondering how that plays out across the second half of the season. But regardless, so Verstappen, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, and George Russell have come in with the most points over the last 5 races. But who's the biggest values? That would be the senior citizen of the paddock in Fernando Alonso. He's racking up 1.63 points per $1 million right now. Mick Schumacher right behind him at 1.61. Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and Sebastian Vettel at 1.33 rounds out the top 5. Yuki Tsunoda, Alexander Albon, Zhou Guanyu, Daniel Ricciardo, and Nicholas Goat Tiffy are the bottom 5 there. They are averaging under a point per million. Actually, Esteban Ocon and Kevin Magnussen are also in here, as Ocon has a couple of DNFs and some not fun races. So that is actually surprising for Ocon. But he's been pretty good most of the year, and he was really good in Austria. Mercedes are starting to flex their muscles a little bit against the McLarens and the Alpines of the world, and he just had to give up position over there. But so the last 5 points per million guys that I just said there, you can fit that entire team in. You can fit the informed team in right now and have Red Bull as your constructor with 1.2 million to spare. So if you're feeling like you just want to ride the guys in a hot car right now, you can totally go with that. As far for me, with my team, I don't think I'm going to be making a lot of changes. Obviously, practice can change that if someone crashes, or if there's any dramatic updates, or if the upgrades look great for AlphaTauri. It could change the game quite a bit heading into the weekend, but I don't have my wild card. I've already used my mega drivers, so I'm not flipping and flopping too much as we head in to the 12th race of the season. Now let's go over to DraftKings. And while it's really nice to have the DFS aspect of Formula One available to us now, like the pricing is set way before qualifying, so this could all change. If you don't know what F1 DFS looks like, if you've ever played NBA or NFL Showdown, kind of like a one-game showdown thing, it's very similar to that. So you have one driver that costs 1.5 his salary, but he gets 1.5 of the points. And then you have 4 other drivers coming in at regular price, along with a constructor. So very similar to how DraftKings have set up some of their other games. So for this weekend, You've got Max Verstappen at 12,000, Charles Leclerc 11,200, Lewis Hamilton 10,200. Keep going down all the way to Nicholas Latifi, who comes in at 3,000. So as of this point, we can just build a quick roster here as I roll around in my chair in the background. So the popular strategy that you see a lot is to go with the driver and the constructor's stack because you get laps led. If you win the race, it's great. In cash games, it's very easy to just go with the pole sitter and the constructor. So let's just do that for now. So Max Verstappen here, let's say he wins pole, and then we will go with Red Bull. $50,000 in salary for this game, by the way. So if I did that, Max Verstappen as my captain, he comes in as 18,000, along with Red Bull at 11,900. So I've only got 20,000 left. Like that takes out a big chunk. So if you go that route, you really do have to find some value. Fortunately for us, we've got the lovely American duo of Kevin Magnussen and Mick Schumacher here. Well, obviously they're not American, but they're in the American car. So that gives you some value there. At you can get both those guys for 7,800, and that would leave you with $6,150 on each driver. Esteban Ocon and his home race would be very interesting here at 5,800, and that would leave you 6,500 to also get the fellow Frenchman Pierre Gasly in. I don't like to really build any lineups until after qualifying, just because, I mean, anything could happen. There is talk that Ferrari may have to take some grid penalties this weekend because of Carlos Sainz's car just straight up exploding in Austria as he was going for the 1-2 Ferrari finish there. So that will be something to keep an eye on as the weekend progresses. Maybe once practice one starts, we'll get some reports about what's going on in the Silverstone Champions car. George Russell could be an option. It's really tough to go against Verstappen. You could potentially, let's see if we can build another quick lineup here. Let's just go with the Ferrari, see where we can get there. So Ferrari with Charles as the captain, that leaves us at 22,400. And then I'll just put in the Haas duo again. Leaves us with 7,300 per person. So you could grab, say, all right, let's say the AlphaTauri look really good this weekend, and we'll just hit Pierre Gasly in here. So that leaves us 8,400, which means we could go with George Russell in the Mercedes. I expect them to run pretty well this weekend because, like I was saying earlier, this Paul Ricard circuit for the French Grand Prix has similarities to Silverstone. So that would give me Leclerc and Ferrari as a captain constructors stack with K-Mag and Mick Schumacher, Pierre Gasly, and George Russell. I don't hate it right now, but like I said, you really can't enter any of this until qualifying comes along. The prices are locked in, so you don't need to worry about like getting a good price in right now. That's like the one downside to the F1 game. From a DFS standpoint, it would be nice. I get why they released the prices so early, but it's also tough to kind of build anything until after qualifying. And you can find out you can get some advice on rotoballer.com from my good friend Justin Carter. He writes the F1 DFS article there. Most weekends, if he has prior commitments, he tags me in as the F2 driver to come out of the paddock and take over. But not this weekend. I will just be enjoying the race and watching my team rack up points in the F1 Fantasy season-long game, but I will definitely be entering a lineup or two into the DFS portion. So that'll do it for today. Let's see. I have a French Grand Prix review podcast scheduled for Monday. It'll probably be Tuesday as I write a MLB DFS article on Mondays, or maybe even Sunday if I'm feeling extra productive. But it will be out there, and then we will jump right back into the Hungary Grand Prix preview next week at some point. I appreciate everyone listening. If you want to like, subscribe, follow the podcast, you can do that pretty much anywhere: Spotify, Apple, Google, all those fun places. You can follow me on Twitter at @UInOrYouOut, where I will be tweeting about the race weekend. I also get some fantasy football, fantasy baseball advice on there as well, and some fantasy Premier League advice as that season draws closer. But very excited for this weekend. I've been gone or sick, kind of out of town for the last couple of Grand Prix, so it'll be nice to just sit down and watch the whole thing. And yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in, so thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.